All right, we got a great show, Greg. I'm super excited today about getting into this, avoiding the escalation trap and knowing when to stop. But first, real quick, everyone, want to shout out to all our listeners, people who keep listening, and new listeners. We've been a little behind the curve on getting episodes out. We've just been slammed this whole first half of the year with a bunch of projects. So we've got that kind of corralled now, in a sense, and now we're excited to get back out and get back on a more more consistent path here and get some more stuff out. We've been adding more to the Patreon, and so you can always find more there. And we've got a lot more coming up. We've got guests, we've got different show ideas that we're working through and sketching out, and some interesting stories that we want to cover with some inside knowledge coming up as well. So thank you so much for hanging in there, everyone, and to all of our newer listeners, because we're still getting more. We appreciate it, and for those of you who've been reaching out, you've got some great episodes coming up. Hopefully, that we're going to talk about some things that you guys reach out to us about. So we appreciate that, especially the folks who have some personal relationship with a case or something on the news. So thank you all for that. I just want to get that out of the way. But today, actually, speaking of the Patreon, Greg, this is kind of a topic I wanted to bring on here onto the podcast, because we have something on the Patreon called "And Another Thing," and you guys can go check that out. And we give these different examples, but the idea is, what we're going to talk about today is kind of stems from those conversations on Patreon. And another thing is kind of, the basis is, the conversation's over or the argument's over, things are de-escalating, and someone wants to kind of throw in their last point. But there's a lot more here that we can discuss for everyone. And the idea being, that some of the worst outcomes in a situation do not begin when a situation first becomes tense, right? When things first start to escalate, they begin when it's actually kind of starting to settle, and someone decides to add one more thing. Someone decides to add one more sentence, or make one more point, or just kind of want to add in another thing. And so I want to start off, Greg, but first, like, why does that happen? Why do we do that as people?
Well, first and foremost, it happens with everybody. So it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you're a teacher or you're
Yeah.
a copper or you're a parent. These things
Or
happen.
Brian's wife.
Oh my God, or daughter, for that matter. These
Yeah.
things happen every day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you how they develop, and then give you the idea of, hey, when I sense this is happening, how to stop it from turning into a shit sandwich. So remember that the initial problems could be legitimate. Okay.
Okay.
There was an incident of disrespect or unnecessary risk or resistance, and you need to get accountability. The mistake doesn't happen then. The mistake happens when somebody that's in that incident fails to recognize that the interaction has somehow changed. They continue pressing because they're still responding emotionally to that first version of the person, dysfunction, or situation. And then as they walk away, that last unnecessary comment thrown out in a glib manner turns that stabilizing interaction that you worked on so long right back into a contest. And so our advice to anybody listening to the podcast is, don't let the behavior that started the event blind you to the behavior that is ending the event. You've got to read the tea leaves. You got to read the room. And those
And
unnecessary comments matter more than all of the initial work that you did.
And we would kind of call that, like, you got to update your baseline,
Yeah,
right? You got to, okay,
absolutely.
the baseline has changed from where this initially started. So I need to update that in order to get a clear picture of the situation.
So
So,
you have
yeah,
inadvertently become a contributing factor, right? So instead of promoting or fomenting problem solving, you're actually creating the dysfunction or adding
right.
to the turbidity that's creating that dysfunction.
All right. So we'll kind of define what I mean by knowing when to stop, right?
Yeah.
Because you can fall into this, sort of trap, and I refer to it as the escalation trap, which has all kinds of other
Brian's
different
fallen for many
meanings.
traps. That's why
Well,
that's
yeah,
just
yeah,
so you know.
exactly.
Let's not go there.
We're now we're like locked in. I can't get out of it, right? Because I already said something and I can't go back, and then now you said something, you can't go
Yep.
back, and so, like, literally the only way out is to continue escalating. But when we say knowing when to stop, by stop we don't necessarily, just like, all right, let's just ignore this or avoid accountability or become, passive, just roll over. It's like, well, what do we actually mean by knowing when to stop, Greg?
Yeah, yeah. So point number one in your mind needs to be that stopping isn't surrender. Okay. Stopping is literally a demonstration of your self-control. You are controlling yourself and your emotions in this place. Now, we understand the way that your brain works and we mimic behaviors. So you being under control is a strong motivator for the other person gaining control. So that's a scientific fact. It demonstrates that you've recognized that your continued pressure is not producing any additional safety or clarity or compliance, and you're not getting any closer to the resolution. It's no longer helpful to the discussion, argument, or situation, and there's no warning sign that you're approaching or you're about to cross that line where any of your further actions or statements are going to be serving anything but your ego. So those points that act as an emotional release for you actually punish the other person. So what we're identifying is, hey, listen, I need to be right in this. I need you to understand that I'm right, not just, hey, I need to be heard in this. I want you to understand how I'm feeling, how this made me react, right? And so there's a big distinction between those, Brian. And then the ultimate goal is that you got to maintain your professional decorum no matter what the interaction is, because once you fall below that standard, then you fall into the trap.
So, and I would say like that's kind of why we talk about like, hey, most people want their say, not their way, right? And most people just have there's that psychological and social imperative where like if I feel wronged, I have to get some. I at a minimum I have to have my feelings validated, right? Someone has to say like, yeah, that was messed up, dude. What happened to you was wrong, or and like that alone can be enough. But then how do we? So in those situations, right? Like it's hard when there's an emotional content or aspect to it. But how do we distinguish that sort of appropriate pressure maybe from piling on? Like, how do I know, like, okay, well, no, I still have to kind of draw the line a little bit here or enforce a standard, but like, I don't want it to seem like I'm piling on.
So yellow pad everything, first of all, and rehearse it. Rehearse it when you don't have dysfunction. Rehearse it when it's just you and you got 15 minutes and you're listening to some music. How would I approach this? So you're tabletopping, right? It's always okay to outline your concerns. The right amount of intensity needs to be balanced to the current unresolved need now in this moment, right? Needing to win, needing to be right means that you could bring a hammer to this conversation rather than a fly swatter. And maybe the fly swatter is much more important. Okay. So that's a huge distinction.
Well, and I've seen you do that before where you actually said like, cause you were trying to de-escalate the situation and move the conversation along, get off this point. Cause it was kind of circling the drain. We're like, oh, this isn't going to, this is reach the point of no return. Right. We have to move this. And you actually said like, hey, I don't want you to feel like I'm piling on here because I'm not. And like you like identified it and then said, because I'm not. And then you said, I think this is where we should, you offered like
the least objectionable point. We go backwards to that point, Brian. So piling on has a direct correlation to the original incident, whatever happened earlier that brought you together. But the problem is it's emotional baggage that you're bringing from that, emotional residue. And it's always harmful, not helpful, because you can't, it's hard for a human to avoid saying, and another thing. And you know what? The week before that, okay, so now what we're doing is we're drifting out of that lane. The record that has one groove, right? And it's important during this to stay in that groove and not deviate, okay? Because where you branch, let's put it this way. Good rule of thumb is asking yourself, look, what good does saying this word or this sentence do in this context? And if your answer is nothing, it doesn't solve anything or move the conversation forward in a constructive direction, then your response is much more likely to distract or add friction than answer the matter at hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, but this is all, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, like, this is all very easy for us to sit here and talk about on a podcast
together when we're not arguing
in a casual conversation, right? But like we fall to we fall to our lowest state of order. The primitive brain is constantly kicking. So like, why then, like, when it comes to this, because you're talking a lot about control in a sense, right? So it's self-control, but it's like meta control, meaning it's like control the situation as much as you can or control what you can control. So why then, and we've all seen it, and people listening to this have seen it or experienced it themselves, why do capable, experienced people, like, why do we still keep going after we've already, achieved the outcome that we needed? Or did we, like, is it emotional baggage, or did I not recognize that I've achieved the outcome, or like, why do we keep going? Why does we do it and another thing?
So understand, one, historical perspective when it comes to two, your biological makeup. So humans are always ready for an attack. They're already ready to defend. That's our makeup. So stress merely narrows our perception. So we see any difference of opinion as a disrespectful challenge, a threat. And we don't deal with anger or defiance or danger very well. So we meet those challenges when it might be best to avoid them. So if you see things ramping up that way, then you take a look and go, this isn't my exit, but I'm going to take it because avoidance here might be the best way out. So we also assign importance to friction. The very first time that we deal with somebody and we know that they're bringing us a problem, absolutely everything that comes out of that person's mouth from that point forward is viewed as the actions or statements or behavior of a problem child. And then we're on the defensive from the moment they walk down the hallway and come into our door. They're making a turn and we're already mentally going, here we go. And that outlook, that predisposition means that we're likely to miss evidence that they are calming down, that they are complying, that they're probing you for an exit, a way out, and you're not offering it because you're still just hearing the blah, blah, blah and waiting to talk. I'll tell you what exacerbates that, being in front of others. If you have an audience, then we feel pressured to demonstrate our power and avoid appearing weak in front of any audience. If it's my kids, if it's in a gosh damn cafeteria, if I'm in a work environment, that's hardwired into humans. We only have a few choices. And if we don't flee, that means we're going to fawn. And what does that mean? That means we're going to cower and put up with the beating, the humiliation, or we're going to stand up and we're going to fight. And at that point, the situation becomes more about winning and much less about solving the problem you're engaged in. So anytime you look at the function that you're doing and it serves no purpose, back off. And this is where that rehearsal can come in, Brian. This is where I plan before I go into the conference room.
Yeah, that's a the plan is always there because like this can happen easily in any workplace. Even where it's not something physical or like whatever, someone arguing with a police officer, I'm not going back to jail thing. Okay, well, there's certain, it's a little bit different, but even in what can be a normal workplace setting, we were actually kind of having a discussion about this right before, where the problem with that is what we're like you just brought up. Once I see someone as like, oh, they're the problem child, or oh, they always have this, start that fundamental attribution error, start attributing all these things to them, where I'm like, no, these are the things that you did. Here's the problem. It's not about you. It's about these specific things that continue to happen. That's called a pattern of behavior, and I'm calling it out. But it's not. Those people think they could be tough conversations, but they shouldn't be, because you're not making about that individual. But like, what is it?
Yep. So rein that in by this. Let's go to the least objectionable place that we might meet somebody. So let's say it's on the playground and everybody's having a good time, and then an argument breaks out. At the very moment that you find yourself playing to the audience, that you're trying to get the audience on board to see that you were right, what you're doing is you're leaving that problem and entering performance. Now, these people misuse in the arena all the time. That's being in the arena. And the problem is, getting into the arena, wearing your armor, grabbing your spear in the net means that you're ready for a fight. That's not the projection that you should be giving. I'm ready to resolve the issue at hand. That's the win. The win. That's what you want to sense.
Yeah, I like kind of framing that as like, is this about the problem or is this about performance? Because we've all seen that before, when someone like, they get upset about something, and then now all of a sudden there's a crowd, and now they keep going. And because so we're talking about, I mean, you were just explaining it from like a personal, like first person perspective, but I can observe that in other people, and I'm like, okay, this is no longer about the issue or what it is. They're now playing to the crowd. They've now created a role for themselves that they have to fulfill in this moment, right? Because they can't walk it back. And so like, it's actually really good to see that and go, okay, now I know where we're at in this situation.
You got to see that from an experimental scientific methodology. You have to see yourself performing as a fly on the wall. If you don't, the problem that you're going to have is you're not going to be able to recreate it and fix the bad behavior, right? So I'll give you an example. We recently saw something, and I'll paraphrase not to hurt anybody's feelings, but a supervisor raises a legitimate issue. Hey, you seem very distracted at that staff meeting. Okay. And that person acknowledged the dysfunction and starts to explain the context of being distracted. And the person cuts her off immediately and goes, you do that all the time, and that's making us look bad. Okay. So what we did is we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to shift from accountability to humiliation. And everybody on that team that was there that watched it, Brian,
Yeah.
said, hey, wait a minute, there's no commitment to corrective action. This doesn't lead to a resolution. This damages trust. This is taking a person who willfully acknowledged that mistake and saying you're going to account for all past mistakes. Again, you're trying to win rather than trying to fix something.
Yeah, and especially in so the people kind of, because they're the first thing is always corrective action, and then we don't always sort of like create the environment, the culture to where like no, you can, it's okay to make mistakes. You just have to acknowledge and admit. There's actually a really good one from that came out from, it was like a Navy ship. It was an aircraft carrier, and one of the mechanics or something on the flight deck immediately was like, didn't have one of their tools accounted for, and they were like, hey, all stop, like I can't find this tool. Well, in that situation, like a plane could be landing, get sucked in, like you're talking catastrophic failure. These things could happen. And so they redirected anyone, no more, they shut down flight ops, got everyone out there, walked everything, got it accounted for, and then they like held the whole formation the next day to praise that sailor who was like, hey, you stood up, you did the right thing, and yeah, did it interrupt the mission, and yeah, did it do this and it cause all these other issues, but we corrected it. And that's the point. That's why those procedures are there, right? Not to admonish that person and now they're getting in trouble, because what does that message send? You know what I mean? And so it was just that one made me think of that, because it's
it's not a very powerful message to the rest of the team. That's the time that you can use an audience, right, to modify a group behavior, to show them, look, if you come forward with this issue, this is about saving lives and completing the mission, albeit a little bit later, but this was an important point. That's how you got to do that. And again, I'm telling you, sketch it out before you print it out.
So
it's hard.
Yeah, well, there's what I see in these kind of escalatory situations too. It's like, especially, let's say you're watching something back on video, or you're sitting as a fly in the wall and you're going like, hey, like what, this is already escalating, and they're not recognizing that the situation is escalating. So is it, what are people missing when they fail to recognize that situation is beginning to just spiral out of control?
So you said it you said it very well early on. The word just eluded me. The idea is that you said behavior and context. So let's drill down on that for just a minute. If you're focusing too heavily on the words, on the verbal content, and you're not watching their behavior with those words in context, then you could be led astray. The issue that they're holding on to, I'm seeing that they're not opening their behaviors, or maybe they're opening behaviors and I didn't update my assessment to that behavioral shift. Okay. Now all of a sudden I see them, they, instead of rolling their eyes, they lean their head back and they're nodding. Okay. So I take your response as an attempt to manipulate me, or an attempt for you to save face, rather than saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a nexus. I'm seeing an off-ramp develop, and boy, I could really exploit that. So our advice should be to anybody listening, look, if the situation is de-escalating, you got to let it. It's easy to fall into the trap where you confuse, look, I don't yet trust this person that I'm speaking with, so I'm going to keep applying pressure until I win. If you're there, then you're going to pass every one of those exit ramps without seeing them. And the idea is, that's why you got to take that pregnant pause, Brian. That's why you got to take that breath. And folks, Brian uses it all the time. He goes, and then waits for the next thing that's going to go on, right? And then what happens is the information creeps out. So if you're doing that, you're likely to see the open door or the open window or a way ahead. If you're not, then what you're going to do is you're just berating the person, and that leads to nothing good.
Well, and obviously we talk about time and distance all the time, and what that means, but with things like rage and anger and all that, like you can't maintain that forever, right? So meaning sometimes just that when people say, oh, give them some time to cool off, like that, that's true, because those emotions, those catecholamines, subside after a while. Your body can't keep pumping out adrenaline and cortisol and
Yep.
all that stuff. It has to recycle. It has to go, hey, dude, I'm spent now. So there is that time component in there that is kind of working to your advantage. Like, well, they can't stay mad forever, unless they're doing the Popeye where he's going around doing the
And get back and constantly under his breath, right? So he's self-regulating, although it's kind of destructive. Look at his arms.
Yeah. So what we do with HBPRNA and how does that sort of add to the conversation here? And what let's frame it in kind of like even the stuff that we talk about on other episodes and within class, and how do we do that? Like, how do we use that? Like, and what value does that have in these types of situations?
So HBPRNA is not mind reading. It's not a collection of isolated tells
Right.
a poker match. It's not a parlor trick. What it does is it helps you assess patterns that become visible, or look for patterns when you're not aware that they exist, and then measure them against the context to determine what fidelity does that have on a baseline, what behavioral direction I can determine from a changing baseline. We were here, now we're here.
Now we're
We
here.
were above, now we're below, right? So the key question isn't, is this person upset? Clearly they're upset or you wouldn't be there, right? The key question is, hey, what's their behavior like now at this point along our baseline? And which direction is that moving? Is that moving forward or behind? Is that moving up or down? Remember, spatially, things move in a lot of directions, Brian, and that's what we teach in class. So I always take the yellow pad. And one of the things that I would say, for if you're listening at home, just try this exercise. So turn your yellow pad on its side. We use ours mostly panoramic, I guess that would be called. And on the left-hand side, put what you could ask, okay? And that's where you're going to list the questions that you think you're going to ask. And then on the right-hand side, go, wouldn't it be better to ask them this? And this is where you formulate that in a better way and rehearse it before you're in the scrum. Because if you're in the scrum, it's never going to come to you, right? So you can ask yourself, are they angry? But a better question would be, hey, is their behavior becoming more or less organized? Are they exhibiting behavior that is more intense or less intense, more confrontational or less? Now, what that gives you, Brian, is that gives you a chart. It gives you a graph that you can refer to as it goes on. Did they just disrespect me? Wait a minute. Let's back that up and say, you know what would be better? Are they presenting a safety or a performance or relationship issue rather than a personal attack? Because it's a personal attack, you can rebound by going, hey, let's not make this personal. Let's stick to the issue at hand, and many other issues, right? So now we're creating a spiral follow-up, right? That would be our third count. The question that you should constantly be asking yourself, are they complying? Am I actually seeing a person complying? So then back it up by saying, hey, does the overall behavior support an actual stabilization of events, or are they just concealing another concern? Because people that pile on, look, more evidence doesn't mean pure evidence. You get what I'm trying to say? So what I'm doing is I want to go along that baseline and go, well, we are here and now we're here. They were, agitating and closing distance, and now they're here where they're contemplative and giving distance. So those are the implements, let's say, that you want to be looking for on your chart. And if you don't have a chart, how are you going to find it? And you go, oh, well, I'm good at baselining. Are you? Where is your baseline? Show it to me. Because if you don't have one, Brian, and you're saying you go into the conversation with yellow pad, no, but I've yellow padded it 5 times before I get there.
Yeah, and these are the clarifying questions that that matter, that allow you to see it, because everyone wants to make it simple. It's like, well, are they a threat? It's like, well, dude, I mean, that's one that's completely subjective term or completely subjective question, because it's based on the person asking it, and one person might consider a threat some people would never even see. What is obvious to some and they think is a threat is not much to another. So it's not even really. So when you said this, like, are they currently right now presenting, because you're putting like a timestamp on that time and distance funnel. You're saying, okay, I'm going to measure right here and I'm going to do a hypothesis test, right? Like, are they currently presenting a safety, performance, or relationship problem? Like, are they currently, what is it? Because like you said, because sometimes labeling it, right, is important, right? So that workplace thing, like, hey, this isn't about you. This is about performance of you and the team, right? When I frame it there, but then they keep going back to something personal. Now I know, okay, well, I tried to make it about this, but you keep making it about this. So it clarifies it for me and gives them the off ramp. You're extending
Exactly.
that, like, okay, and then they go, okay, yeah, I see how it's affecting performance. So now,
Yep.
okay, I'm getting you're agreeing with my assessment or agreeing with my hypothesis. So now we're already starting to take steps in the right direction. So
Exactly.
those clarifying questions of is like, yeah, are they making the are they making the situation more or less chaotic? Are they, I mean, it's
And
like,
look, that's binary, but it's a simple emotional based binary for human behavior. And so you would anticipate that. Is this getting better or worse? Gosh damn, medics ask that when they come to a 7-Eleven and you've been
yes,
shot. They're saying, is the pain worse now, or was it worse when I first got here? Are you feeling any relief? That's what they want to know.
yeah, and that's what it comes into now, like, understanding those clarifying questions,
Yep.
right? Because what does it mean in this moment right now, based on this updated baseline? Okay, we've been in this argument for 5 minutes, right? What else has changed? I have to update it from there, not based on what happened maybe 20 minutes ago or a
Yep.
day ago, right? It's like, okay, but what does it mean right now in time? And that's kind of where you can start reading that direction and get ahead of it and go, okay, I see now, this is de-escalating, we're good. Or, you know what, this is not, I'm making all of these, substantial attempts that are genuine, and it's still, I'm not seeing the off ramp, I'm not seeing the
Yeah.
sign saying, exit quarter mile, this lane only. Like, that's not, it's not there yet. So because one of the things, like, you don't want to fall into the trap of then, okay, everything's okay. So a person can appear calm and still be dangerous.
Right.
So how do we, I mean, how do we avoid treating de-escalation as a guarantee? And that's like the workplace violence ones you'll see, where they get up, leave the room, and
Yep.
sometimes don't even say anything, and you're like, okay, what the heck? And that's
We
when they
win.
go out to the
Right.
parking lot and
Right.
they pull the shotgun out of the trunk and they come back in, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
how do we avoid treating that de-escalation as a guarantee?
So let's go back to every podcast you and I have ever done, every in-class training session that we've ever done. Reduced intensity is information. It's not proof. Information isn't intelligence. It has to be processed. So it's one more factor to consider. Your assessment has to include all the basics of reading the room, their movement, their distance, their attention, their access, their fixation, positioning, and all of that has to be based against the environment and the baseline. So these are baseline white belt elementals, and once you've measured the weight of those observations and perceptions, now you consider the presence of others in the crowd. That could be exacerbating the situation. An audience might be changing their behavior, positive or negative. So it's easy to mistake somebody getting quieter as them calming down. It might mean they're digging in. It might mean they're becoming more deliberate and tuning you out. So the goal is to not assume the good intent. The goal is to read the tea leaves and adjust your intervention to exploit or accept the current behavior, as long as it's going in a positive manner. Never accept negative behavior. Never. Okay. You have to set boundaries and you have to reinforce those boundaries. But it's real easy to go, hey, we're getting somewhere. Okay, I like that. Let's follow up with that. Because now
Right.
what you're doing is you're conducting a test, aren't you? You're conducting a test. Was it real? Did this person really just have that epiphany? Or are they covering up for something that they don't want me to see?
So yeah, and it's, so what you're talking about too is, like, it's not just about maybe setting boundaries or calling out something inappropriate. It's also, praising the direction
Yes.
that you do want, right? So it's okay, no, not over here, I'm putting the boundary on, but, oh, you're going over here, hey, I like that, I'll go over there with you, right?
Yep.
And so, and I'm going to ask you a question that I know is really hard to answer, but this is the stuff that most people want, and it's a little, it's hard to do, because everyone goes, what are some of the indicators, what are some things to look for? And we're always like, well, it's not the thing to look for, it's how to look. And you're looking for really just incongruent signals, or is this incongruent or is this congruent? But how would, what are some indicators that might show someone is moving towards de-escalation? They're like, they're not signaling yet, but they're slowly drifting over to that exit lane, right? They haven't put on the blinker, but like, you can see, okay, they're starting to kind of move over
Yeah.
towards that exit lane and take an off ramp.
So the key is that you want to create a degree of fluency in this. You don't necessarily need to be a subject matter expert, but you need to be good at it. So one of the things that you have to get good at is feeling a person's willingness to at least see at least objectionable path out of the interaction that we're involved in. Okay. I can see a resolution. If it'll never work, we're all going to die. That's real hard to come back from. So if I see, these type of events and I feel them, I can perceive them. They're given less interruptions. Okay. They've reduced their verbal intensity. They're using less space for their direct confrontation. Like instead of every time it's walking up on me and they're, being very demonstrative. Okay. They're allowing more physical space for that conversation to continue. I see or hear or feel a shift from them being accusatory to them forming an explanation. They're forming it and they're trying to work it out in their own mind while we're right there together. And you sense they're accepting the reasonable request that you gave them. You give them a reasonable request. Look, I need to take a step back for a minute. Okay, let's lower our voices and see if we can get at it. Okay, look, they're at least seeing the boundaries. That's a step ahead, right? We're moving forward. So when you start sensing that there's less fixation on that original dysfunction, the original grievance, then what you've got is now you're creating that time distance gap. You're observing a more organized speech pattern in this person, a lot less frenetic movement motions and posturing. Posturing is an important one, Brian, because those are electrochemical neurotransmitters that are causing me to pump out my chest and show you my jugular. When I see less of those, it's clear that I'm getting through to you and we can together work on the solution. It can't all be me. It can't all be me. You have to give part of the solution for it to become a contract, something we can enforce later.
And some of this, if you got to take it on the context of the situation, especially if you don't know the person. Now, if you know the person, then you can you'll have a better baseline for what's typical, right? Yep. And I remember like when me and my wife like kind of were first dating and everything, and she'd be like, one time we got in an argument about something. It wasn't anything big at all. I thought it was just a discussion. She framed it as an argument, but I didn't get that because she's like, I try to talk to you about something. You get this Chicago attitude. That's what she called it. That was her term. And I was like, what? There you go. And I'm like, okay. And then once she spent Christmas at the Marin household, she's like, oh, I get, this is just how you guys talk to each other. Like, this isn't like you're not actually upset. I'm like, yeah, we're, just hilarious, passionate about whatever, you know what I mean? Because then she got to see what an actual fight at the Marin household looked like. Yep. And she was like, oh, wow, that's much more aggressive than what you were
all doing. Comparison points that I had. Yeah.
But what it means is like, it's when you're developing that baseline, that knowledge of the individual is also helpful. But, what ways, how would you be able to tell that, like, all right, you know what, maybe I got to stay on this a little bit longer. Maybe this isn't de-escalating yet. Maybe this isn't taking that off ramp. Like what can I tell? Is there something that I can, learn?
So I love that you brought up a very specific context. So let's talk about that at home. Let's talk about that around the holidays, right? So you notice that the language seems to be, relaxing, calming down, yet the posture and the positioning is either more concerning or increases in aggression. Okay, clear sign something's not working. We don't have the normal give and take of a conversation. Now their comments keep circling back over and over to a very single point. Well, you said this. Well, when I heard you say that, they're following you. They're monitoring your actions very closely, looking for that point to re-engage. That's not helpful. Okay, that's combative. As a matter of fact, we would put that in the combatives manual, right? So their continued attempt to bring others into the argument on your side. He does this. You guys have seen that.
We call that enlisting the aid of others.
Enlisting the aid of others. We call that the recruiting phase, especially for coppers. You see that, you're in trouble. They're still at odds with accepting the situation at hand. They're still ready to fight. So if you want to see them gain space, gaining space can be a very good thing, okay? But if you see them gaining space to give them an edge, moving to a position behind the island in the kitchen, moving to a position behind the kitchen table from where they were seated, okay? Saying, well, I've got something I need to show you, a document or whatever, or like you said, headed out to their car. Okay, that could be a weapon. Whatever that is, that misdirection is an attempt to gain access or reposition to a position of advantage. And that should be concerning to you. Anytime somebody, for no other reason than to gain an advantage, does something, you have to take a step back. You got to give the gift of time and distance. Now their behavior becomes less expressive, but it's much more deliberate. You know that that's going to happen next. Look, have you ever seen the two boxers, Brian, where they get together and they talk before the upcoming bout? What happens? It's all shit talk till they get there to the stare down. And that stare down is the most disturbing part because that's likely the touch off point for touching, fighting, physical activity.
Well, that's a great example because you just said, like, the behavior maybe becomes less expressive but
Yep.
more like deliberate and more purposeful. So like those things are
Exactly.
meant to create that, right? That's a great example, because like those pre-fight weigh-ins and this, like they're supposed to they're create the buzz for the fight and everything's coming up, and they're all, talking crap and doing all this stuff. They got their entourage with them,
Yep.
but then like you said, they bring them up face to face to do the photos, and like they don't know, because like fights they've started right there before, right? So
Yes.
or someone's done something, and sometimes it was started by like an accidental bump by one of them, and then that
Yep.
guy goes, "Oh, here it is." It's like the
So you just
it's
gave
like the crescendo where it's right there,
exactly.
and
You
you can
just
see
gave
it
the
and feel
perfect
it.
analogy for de-escalation. So put yourself mentally in that situation. This is a great on-duty roll call. What could you do to lessen the severity, to add to the de-escalation likelihood? First of all, turn off the lights and the cameras. Second of all, get a little bit of distance between the participants. Next, lose the entourage. You see what I'm trying to say? So de-escalation is a function of the baseline elements in that environment and the context that you find yourself in. Some people won't ever be de-escalated, okay? But that doesn't mean that you have to start escalation when you arrive. De-escalation has got to be an ongoing process, not just for this call, for every call that you're on. How can I ease the anxiety, Brian? How can I see the dysfunction more clearly so we can get right after the solution?
Yeah, and you said it right there. It's like, humans, we act differently in front of a camera,
Every
in front of
time.
an audience, whatever it is, when there's other people there, right? So that's just like that everyone is going to do that. And so now, if I can help, if I yeah, like you're talking about, like if we can remove the audience, like if you took
Yep.
if you took the cameras away from the weigh-in, none of
Turn
that
down
would
those
happen.
lights, right? Come on.
If there was no one in the audience, none of that would happen. If it was literally just, hey, you're going to go on that scale, you're going to go on that scale here, meet in the middle for a photo,
Yep.
that would be it. But that's not entertaining. So like the environment is what increases the pressure. The
Absolutely.
situation, the context of what it is, all adds to that. So just by letting that out. So, and you got to kind of stop for a second and kind of take some take account here of what's happening. And that's actually something I kind of wanted to run past you, and I've seen it before. It's not something we sort of explicitly talk about in class,
Mhm.
but because we're talking about a couple things. One, obviously, reading and recognizing the situation for what it is, right? So establishing the baseline, determining intent, seeing where it's going. But then we're also talking about like the self awareness, the self regulation, the internal baseline, right? So you can't control everything externally, but you can control some stuff internally, right? A lot of it's just going to be there running depending on what state you're in, but like you can kind of you have some control. Even breathing is one way to control your autonomic nervous system.
Certainly.
So there's ways to do it. But what I've seen before is like literally it's called like the stop test, or you like when we say, what does it mean to stop for a second? Well, so it was like a little kind of way to think about it, where the S would be in stop: separate the present from the past, right? So what is happening now, distinct from what just happened 5 minutes ago? Like, what is it right now versus 5 minutes ago? And I actually saw an interesting video on social media. It was a police pursuit. It was out in California. Multiple agencies, they had the helo up, and they're following us around. And like then at one point, because the radio, you can hear all the radio traffic, right? At one point, the watch commander, back to station, called off the pursuit. He's like, "Hey, back off, call it off. We're done." And they had the
Right.
bird overhead, and he's going, and so the pilot on there is like, "Hey, just so I'm clear." He was trying to do the, I think there's a better way.
Yep.
He's like, so I'm clear. There's no, we're gonna let this guy go who was just involved in a shooting. And then whoever was running the watchman was like, no, this person was suspected of being part of a shooting, meaning like we might be chasing someone for something else,
Yep.
and then we
Could be a
cause a
witness.
fatality,
Yep.
whatever it is, right? But he's running either way. But like,
Yep.
hey, we don't know. And he's like, and then the pilot got back and was like, no, this person, I want you to understand, I observed what appeared to be muzzle flashes coming from his vehicle. So that, like, you know what I mean? It changed the dynamic a little bit. And the watchman said, like, we're calling it off, back off. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's one of those things where even in the situation, right, it's like, okay, stop. what happened at the beginning of this pursuit is very different than what's happening right now. And so it was just a great way to frame, like, separate the present from the past.
That's the hardest thing to do too. That's a great one, Brian.
Oh yeah.
Because the hardest thing to do is for you to say knowingly that this is about now and moving forward, not about all of those injustices I witnessed in the past. So that's
that's what I got to do with the wife when she's like, well, and I'm like, okay. What does this have to do with what we need to get done right now?
Let's limit it to the 10 things I did wrong today.
Right. Like, can we just focus on what I did wrong right now, not 3 weeks ago? Right. So then the T would be like, test your purpose, like think in your head, like, what am I actually doing here? Am I trying to create safety? Am I trying to get some clarity? Am I trying to establish a boundary? Am I trying to solve a problem? Or am I just trying to make a point? Like, what do you, because you'll feel that too. You're like, I've noticed that too. We're like, oh, I'm starting to go off the rails and be like, that's not going to help the situation. I'm going to go ahead and leave that one. I'm going to go ahead and keep that one. I'm not going to fire off that text message or email, because that's just pouring gas.
No matter how good it seems to be right now, you get what I'm saying? Give it a little time, and guess what?
No matter how good it might feel, but like, but it's a great way to do. It's like, what am I doing here? Am I just trying to make a point? Yep. Or am I trying to solve the situation and clarity? Like, what is it that I'm actually doing with this? And then the O being observe the direction of behavior. So observe the direction of behavior, just like we talked about. Is this escalating? Is it stabilizing? Is it de-escalating? Like, what's happening here? Where is it going? Because you look at it, no matter what situation, every situation you've ever been in life eventually comes to an end at some point. So it's like, this is going to end. Based on the direction it's going right now, where is it likely going to end? Is it going to be good or bad? And if you frame it that way, you can start to see the pre-event indicators of what's coming next. So always observe the direction of behavior. And then P and stop would be pick the proportionate next move. So pick the proportionate next move. And I like that one because it's like, all right, what's my next move here? Do I continue on the path we're going? Do I try to, fall back a little bit and gain some ground? Do I reduce pressure? Do I create distance? Do I offer an exit? Is this the one where I know I have to put a boundary in, or, hey, Greg, I'm getting nowhere with this guy. Can you try this? Right. Or do we end? Do I have to just literally just put the perndle in R and back out of the situation and go, that's it? Because these are choices. And if we get, mentally, emotionally hijacked, right, we fall into that escalation trap. Like, our limbic system is making those choices for us. We're not consciously making them, right? So try to make that move next forward. So I saw it. I liked it. I thought it was something easy to kind of listen to because it puts it in that stop analogy. But like, tell me why that's hard to do, or tell me why, like, Brian, that's not really going to work, or it's a little bit more difficult. But
first, I'll give you an experience. So I was expelled from high school 3 times before I decided they didn't want me, so I'm not going.
Oh, nice.
And the idea is that all 3 were self-inflicted. I remember at the first one getting called in, and they were ready to talk about the execution of the punishment phase and what that was going to be. And I kept wanting to revisit the original incident, and high on my pulpit, I had every right to be disagreeable and do this, and my actions were and the problem was I couldn't separate the present from the past. So that's hard for me. And then when you look at the observe the direction of behavior, that's hypothesis testing. Are we better now? Are we better now? Right. So I would go, because remember, I've just seen these. This is the first time. So at first blush, I would tell you that, first of all, I like it. It's easy to follow. Second of all, I would tell you that testing the purpose has got to be the hardest, because all humans are ego driven, and we're defensive by nature. So the key is to observe your own actions like a fly on a wall. Second time you've heard me say that today. And we can justify nearly any action as necessary when we're emotional. Remember, parents, spouses say that their wife, son, husband, whatever, could never do that. Look, given the right amount of emotional context and perceived pressure, humans are capable of amazingly bad things. Okay. So the most disciplined question is, what outcome, what effect am I trying to create with this sentence, with these words hooked up the way that they are? That implies you're already using the gift of time and distance. You're measuring your response, not just waiting for that person to stop talking so you can speak, because active listening is huge here. What am I seeing? Am I seeing an attempt to escalate? Am I seeing an attempt to stay, even bandwidth, which is not going to be helpful? Or am I looking for an exit, right? Am I probing to see, hey, what options are available to me? So once I've sized up that argument in chief, the four corners of the document, then review the words about to come out of your mouth or before you hit send, and then understand that if your response is rooted in revenge, if your response is rooted in punishment, or you think it's so funny. This is a great comment. Stewie, oh, I wish I would have come up with that earlier. In fairness to somebody, right?
Yeah.
Or dominance or control. Okay, then don't say it. You can say it to yourself in the shower. You can go, man, I should have. You can do the Popeye, right? But you're about to do more harm than good. You might not be able to unring the bell that you're about to hit with that hammer, right?
Yeah.
So I just say that to me, that's the absolute hardest.
Yeah, no, that is, and again, this is why like we try to keep like simple, kind of almost like tactical takeaways, things that you can try out. That's definitely one. But all of these, it's a framework. It's not a
Exactly.
It's they're thinking points. They're not a tactic, technique, or procedure. And I know
They don't need
everyone
to
is.
be. They don't need to be. They need to be discussion points that I can use to frame what I'm about to say or do.
Let's just hit that right now, because that's what a lot of people are looking for. That's what different people. Oh, you're going to do this, and you're going to follow this 4-step process, whatever. And like that's great to think or analyze or go back and go, oh, okay, I see how this works. However, like it's not how it works. It's why we always talk about it's not, here's what to look for. It's here's how to look, because it's not always going to be that same thing, or it's not going to be that easy. But it doesn't have, like you just said, you just nailed it. It's like it doesn't have to be. You don't have to have a very specific process. It's because you have to find what works for you, what works for the person you're dealing with, given the context of the situation that you're in. Well, that's a lot to take in. So it's more. It's like what we do. Like, hey, it's baseline plus anomaly equals decision. And everyone's like, okay, I'm seeing this anomaly. I'm seeing this anomaly. It's like, no, dude, like, don't spend your time looking for anomalies. Spend your time figuring out what the baseline is, because the more you throw into there, the better it is. The more fidelity in there, like all the incongruent signals are going to pop out to you. It's the same thing in these cases. It's like, okay, well, so those questions are things you can do in the moment, though.
Let me throw something at you. Okay. Yeah. I get highly frustrated when I see crap online where people break down a video. And the very first thing they say as subject matter experts is, I would have done this, or I wouldn't have done that. Okay.
Or you can't do this, or you can't, don't ever do this. Or,
exactly. You weren't there. Okay. So the framework should be, how can we take a look at what's happened and move forward from that? Is it a leadership intervention? Is it a training intervention? Did the officer understand? Okay, now we're coming with an actionable list of items, outcomes. Do you get what I'm saying? That modify behavior. That's a way forward. Going, oh, look here. Oh, man, that just highlights.
Well, everyone's jumping right to the solution. And you're like, well, hang on. You haven't even clearly defined all of the elements of this problem.
Right.
You
What's
haven't
that problem
looked
feel
at
like? How big is it? Right. Is it culture wide, Brian? Is it agency wide? And I would say, ask yourself that, whether you're an HR or a parent. Is your role as a parent at home so destructive that you're creating this without even being there? You don't even notice it, right? So spend all that time bitching and looking for punishment or revenge, researching what's the true problem here? What's the nature and the depth of this? And then go to try to solve it.
Yeah, the parenting one is a good one, because like if I see, just normal stuff, and most see my wife starting to get frustrated or with kids or something like that, like I immediately have to be like, I'm slowing things down. Hey, let me get that. Hey, I'll get them. Don't worry about that. Because like you can't have bad cop, worse cop, right?
They can't all be stick, Brian. Because
no, it doesn't.
It kind of is it Arcadia, though.
Well, it's because of how we grew up. It is.
We're defensive by nature.
Hey, don't do that. Hey, don't do that either. Hey, don't do that. Well, what am I supposed to do? Exactly. It's the MacGruber line.
I'll tell you what
Just tell me. Yeah. Okay. So that. So I don't know where we're going with that, but the idea is that those MacGruber references. I know. All right. So let me kind of give a little example here to talk through some of this stuff. So, and I'm trying to keep these. Deliberately keeping some of these scenarios vanilla, so people in their head can think of things that they've experienced or even seen online, right? Whatever. Like there's all these, that's the big thing now, it has been for a while, where it just like everyone wants to go video something, get a reaction, to go, wild on social media, which is funny, because like you see people doing it and you're like, but what's interesting to me is like people still fall for it. Like this
Yep.
person's clearly just trying to come in and get you upset to put you on the internet, and it's obvious, but like you're still falling for it. But I'll give like a scenario, like so a person, repeatedly told like, hey man, like I need you to get back, right? I need you to step back. They start arguing, right? Then they create distance and begin to comply. And then you'll see that then now let's see me, I'm the one dealing with him, but
Mhm.
then I keep moving toward them, repeating the instruction, say, hey, I need you to get back and I need you to stay over here. They're kind of backpedaling, yet I'm walking toward them. And so then that person becomes confrontational again. It's like, where do those situations begin to change? Like
Yeah.
how do I change that dynamic? Where can we step in and see that?
So an accidental demonstration of intent is intent nonetheless. So you're reading their initial
Okay.
behavior, and
Yeah.
that means they justified their knowledge of the boundary. By them moving, that means they accepted the boundary. Okay. And then the behavior direction shifted because now, as they're creating appropriate distance and beginning to comply, the teacher, cop, or parent didn't update their assessment of the situation, and so they kept acting out the initial plan. The initial plan is moving back, and I can't see that there's an exit lane, right? So your
Yeah.
consistent insistence on near proximity, okay, and the additional verbal pressure took away any chance that the person was going to engage in further de-escalation activity, and now you're starting to rob them of their dignity. The situation shifted to being about solving the problem to be about exerting my ego and my control and my identity. I have the badge. I control this. I'm the teacher. You need to back up. That's all acknowledged. So let's acknowledge all that up front and take it off the table and just say, you need to move back. And when the person says, why do I need to move back? And saying, well, you're scaring me. Oh, I'm scaring you? Yeah. So please move back and then we can have this discussion. Boom. Just disarmed it. Now, if the person chooses after that to continue to go ahead, after you've already set the boundary that you're frightening me here, I'm
Yeah.
afraid, Brian, that sets a very demonstrable example for later on when now you say, well, I had to continue to move forward because clearly the person demonstrated intent. My intent, though, was that subversive move where I say back up and then I take that step. Wait a minute. Okay, you got to relax that roll. You get where I'm going there?
Yeah, well, I saw again. There's so many great examples on social media where this one was like it was like these two bouncers at this bar, and it was an outdoor patio thing, and they're like, "Hey, dude, like you got," and there's some distance between them, and they're like, "Dude, you're done. You got to go. Get out. Go out." And the guy's arguing, yelling, saying, "Get out now!" Or we're like, they're trying to put the pressure on him, and he goes, "Fine," and he like right there was the edge. There was like a gate, waist
Yep.
high swing gate. He walked out and stood on the other side of the gate, so he was now out on the public sidewalk, right? So he had left that patio area and he just stood out there. He's like, fine, I'm gone now. And they didn't go, they could right there. I was like, oh, they go, thank you, sir, appreciate it, and walked away. And the guy would have had no one to yell at. But then
Right.
no, they kept, it was just like they were
It's not
locked
enough.
in.
That's it.
Yes, no, get back,
Exactly.
get your hands off the gate, get this. Like, well, once he's out there doing it, one now, like that's like he complied,
Yep.
but you guys still wanted to have a say and be a smartass and be a
So
jackass.
all
But
wounds
like
are self-inflicted, buddy. All
but
wounds.
they
Come on.
just it was just like he just did exactly what you asked him to do. He left. Is he still being an asshole and saying, "Oh, I'm standing right here on a public sidewalk and I can." Like, yeah, but guess what? He can. And you know what? Call the
Now it's
police.
become funny. You know what I'm
You know what I
saying?
mean? It's like, yeah, like hang out there, dude. Like, go ahead. Like, I mean, it's so hard for humans to to disengage like that because once that limbic system is in, man, and I'm on this groove on the record,
Yep.
I'm not constantly looking for other options, or I'm not constantly updating my baseline, or I'm not clear on what success looks like, right?
Yep.
It becomes now you make it about yourself, right? It's like, you know what I mean? So it's like, how do I do that? Like, what's the better next move when I see those things? Because I have to be able to, in the moment, gauge, okay, you know what, this isn't ideal, but it's successful.
Yep.
we've crossed a threshold here.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And it's a win. And look, we don't want to frame things as win or loss, but the idea is that did it move your agenda forward in a positive manner? Okay. So that's success. And success can also be translated as a win, right? So if you need a win, that was a win. You did it with the most minimal verbal and physical violence possible. So there's nothing better than that. And you can easily turn that in your example was a scenario, and I love scenarios. So I would
Yeah.
say go back to like, I only have limited social media, but I like reading stuff by Dwayne Wolf. I certainly like Pappy Pappenfuss. Why? Because
Yeah.
Pappenfuss takes a large, complicated argument and he breaks down specific factoids that would tend to show you something happened. Now, you can use
And
every
case
one
law
of
and
them.
precedent. Yeah.
Yep, we can use every one of those at on-duty roll call. So I would say turn Brian's, for you guys listening at home, turn Brian's into an on-duty roll call. So ask a probing question on, okay, we saw what happened. What would have been a better next move? How could we have changed this likely outcome? And now you're getting the people to demonstrate their proficiency, but more importantly, you're helping them with their fluency. So, for example, somebody comes up and says, well, let's maintain clear, consistent boundaries. And if I have to adjust that boundary, I have to account for it. I have to say why. Okay, that's good. Jim, well, reduce unnecessary verbal pressure. Stick to what you need to accomplish. And many times you might have to add the why. Okay, well, I don't always agree with the why in a tense situation. Maybe when it's resolved, okay, now we have a discussion, Brian. So, Laura, well, let's give directions and an opportunity for a clear, concise exit from the encounter. Hey, look, I didn't call me here. I'm clearly here to help resolve this issue. So working together, you see how that language all of a sudden shifts it? And so the final point on this mock on-duty roll call would be, look, when we go out there today, let's never engage in any language or commentary that turns compliance into humiliation. That's not what we're about. We work at the behest of the community. We work for the community. So that means that we're all in this, to use your dad's phrase, God rest his soul. We're all in this together. Nope. We're all in this at the same time. You remember that? Best words of advice ever. And you know what? That's a de-escalation tool. He got right to the issue with that, Brian. That was a great thing.
Yeah. And these are that, again, I think that defining and measuring what success looks like and a win or anything is just, even as small as it is, like it's calling it out, like, Shelley always says, celebrate the small wins, right? So it's like when I go back to the example I just gave with the bouncer, like, okay, did he leave and is he stop point? Well, he didn't go home and walk away like you wanted, but the guy walked out of the establishment. He actually did what he was supposed to do.
Let's go there then. So what should we do when a person complies? So the very first thing those bouncers should have said was, thanks for creating the space I asked for. We can address any of those other issues later, and then go to your neutral corners, right? Now, I'm not looking at a video and going, hey, look at what these did. I'm saying, let's have a discussion on how we can fix what happened and how we can end it on a positive note for both parties. That person can come back later when they're not drunk or it's not a birthday or if they didn't get, felt insulted or whatever else. And now look, it's a win-win. So win-wins are really good for everybody. I know you're ready to split, but do me a favor. I need you to remain here with me while we sort this out together. What are you doing? You're enlisting the aid of others. It just happens to be the person that you were called on. And a cop says, well, I can't do that. It lessens my authority. No, it doesn't lessen shit. It shows that you're a human. So then you tell the person, look, you have a choice here. We can get through this working together. What did I just do, Brian? I set very clear boundaries without being a dick.
Well, and what you did is gave yourself, like, you gave them an option, and so they then get to react to that. If so, you said, "Hey,
right?" I mean,
that's what
we established.
That's what I'm saying. So you're saying, like, okay, hey, we can do this together. And if that person meets, like, hey, we aren't doing shit together, it's like, okay, now I know.
Just done. What element have we added to that baseline? Okay, the fidelity of the baseline increased, and guess what? You know what reporting does? Reporting is, I said this, they said that, and the crowd goes, yeah, he's right. Okay, now I have a leg to stand on, and it's not the pirate leg,
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's like, I'm giving you this opportunity, and you not only didn't take it, you actually put a boundary down and said, no, that's not happening.
You dropped the gauntlet.
It's
literally,
like, okay,
you dropped the gauntlet. Yes.
Well, now you've made this go a different direction. Not me. You've now made and that's good to know. Even after that, like, well, that's when the situation went, or that's when I knew it was unlikely that this person was going to comply or do this because based on these factors. You know what I mean? Like, it's those small things that you're trying to measure, and like
your stop model illustrated that perfectly. Look, there's a lot of good stuff there on the market, but to evaluate it, what process led to actual de-escalation and what allowed for escalation criteria. So your bravado your badge, your uniform, the number of coppers, all of those things add to the equation, right? Which one of those can I reduce without reducing force pro, without reducing safety and security? You get what I'm trying to say? And still get to the desired outcome. How many times have we done that? How many times have we taken a knee and done that? You and I do that constantly, right? But should we do that for an event, a parade, hiring, a firing? You see, and we don't.
And it's just staying focused on, what's the outcome I'm trying to achieve? What's the effect I'm trying to have? Not what's actually going on. It's like, this is going somewhere. Where do I want it to go? And will this get it in that direction? Or is this person not allowing me to? Like, if you've given every choice or every option and you're trying to, like, if just understanding what the effect or the outcome is that you're trying to achieve, like, that alone allows you to frame it, within the situation that you're in. I wanted to jump to because we talked about it at the beginning a little bit, but I've got a good one from this. But how can bystanders, how can they interrupt that pylon? Like, if I'm not necessarily involved in this incident, but I'm off to the side, I'm there, and I want to interrupt that pile. I want to make sure this ends well, or I'm out to dinner with my family or whatever, and I know where this thing is going. Like, what can a bystander do when they see one person continuing to press after the interaction has begun to stabilize? Because there's a lot of you when you're not in the situation, or you're not involved, but you're there and you're just observing. You got really good perspective because you don't have a dog in the fight, and you're going, well, I see this guy and I see this guy and I see this happening. I see this happening. So, like, you kind of have a bit of an advantage in that situation, right? Just observing. Right. And so, like, what can someone do to kind of interrupt that escalation trap?
Yeah. So real quickly, it's been 95 degrees all this week. I've got the hot house lights on and everything. So if it looks like I'm melting, I actually am, Brian. So if I go down, just leave me in cover.
You got to wear shorts, man. We can't see.
Oh my God, I got to take my pants off. So I had to write it down because I think it's right. The thing that kids get on that have the horses and the wagons and the merry-go-round. Okay. So I want to make sure that I say it right if I'm going to use that as an example. I would ask you a perfunctory question. Is it easier standing in line with your ticket, choosing your horse and getting on, or trying to get on when the merry-go-round is already moving? Okay. So just think of that for a minute, you wiseacres that are out in the audience. What I'm trying to get at there is only intervene if you have a duty or an obligation to intervene. What do I mean? Intervention can sidetrack all of the progress that's going on in that encounter, and you may not see it clearly. You may see it from a perspective or an angle where you're going, oh man, that looks like it's getting heated quick. I'll step in and solve the problem. Look, hero, you've got to make sure that you're reading it clearly before you jump in. Now, when would you have a duty or an obligation? Excessive force. You see a parent dragging a kid around by the arm, and the kid's becoming injured, or booting a dog or something. You have to come up with your own moral compass, but it's very clear in society what behaviors are accepted and what aren't, right? So now let's say that you do that. Now I'm stepping in, publicly undermining either the person controlling the situation or the encounter is just going to create another contest with authority. So you coming and go, hey, there's no reason for doing this here. And you don't know what the fuck you're talking about because you weren't here 3 minutes ago, right? So frame. This is where rehearsal comes in. Now, look, you're saying, hey, I'm a copper. My job is to come in and break shit up. You're a copper. Your job is to read the tea leaves, solve for X, and figure out the best, least intrusive intervention to get everybody what they need. So if escalation is called for, well, then by all means escalate. But remember that if somebody else is standing in front of you doing it for you, and you come in and go moving them out of the way without their tagging you like World Wrestling Foundation or whatever it is now, that's a bad thing. So if you can, redirect the conversation towards a shared objective, and that can be with the person that's leading it. So I can look at Brian, and we've done this many times before, going, hey, Brian, let me take it from here. I know what he's talking about more clearly. Okay. Or you can come to and go, hey, this is a great conversation, but let's move it to the break room. Or, okay, either one of us, or Dan, the emotionless genius, comes in and says, look, we've discussed a lot. We have what we need right now. So let's take a break and we'll revisit this in an hour. He's always the voice of reason because, we get agitated because we're all alphas and we all get into the same room with our objectives clear and visible on our sleeves. And then we get angry because we're thinking everybody's using accusatory language and all they're doing is fact finding, right? So your ultimate goal is always to create off ramps, not to win the argument or decide what's the right approach. So even to a copper dealing with a violent suspect in the lobby of a place, okay, what actions or statements can I use now to make this go another way? Because right now you're scaring people and you're breaking stuff, and we can't have that. That can't continue. Those type of things, Brian, you have to think them out in the patrol ready room, not on the gosh damn street, because that's the worst possible time to say, hey, let's create an experiment. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to go back to that, we have the information we need now. Let's take the logical next step and work together to resolve this. I like using the term together. I can see that you're complying. So let me give you some room to do that. You get what I'm trying to say? And now I back off. Okay, that's a design to build trust, isn't it? And you're going, well, I can't do that because if I got to arrest him, dude, if you got to arrest him, you got a bigger gang than he does, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't have to rush and videotape your own death. And then, I would also add something like, look, I understand you have additional concerns, and let's get past this one, and then we'll discuss those. So that means, hey, there's a future after this encounter. I like building that into things. That's a big de-escalation point for me.
Yeah, you're providing, what you're doing is you're providing other options. You're getting them out of this initial heated,
Yes.
overstimulated
Right now.
moment, the right now, to go, well, okay, but there's the right now, but then there's after, and then there's after that, and there's after that, and then there's this. So like, let's table this conversation for now, and let's, whatever. But you talk about a little bit about that kind of teamwork aspect of it too, is like when you said that, hey, Brian, let me take it from here. Like, I know, like, that means wave off, like, or like you're seeing something I'm not. Or if I go, hey, Greg,
Precisely.
that's a great point.
It's
but
not
like,
a personality issue. It's not, Brian. It's intended to say you're not seeing a point clearly that I'm seeing, and that's a trust issue for
well, because you talk about, like, for the law enforcement example, the on duty roll call stuff. I mean, that's that type of language, those pro words, the communication that you have, that like, hey, when someone comes up and they say this to you, that means you're done. Let them take over. Sit back, take a breath, and observe. Because you have to have that. The kind of guardian angel. You got to have someone overwatch looking, in a sense, because they're going to have a better perspective and go, all right, well, I'm going to pass the ball to you then.
I need everybody hearing my voice to understand you need that in the boardroom and in the classroom too. So you need those safe words that you can say where now all of a sudden, you're a C-suite executive and you look at your executive secretary, or you look at the chief of staff and go, these are great points. Perhaps we should move that to a follow-on discussion or to the next meeting or whatever else. And that person immediately catches on, there's something I'm missing here. We have to stop this. We have to table this and move on. And, operating at the speed of trust means that we've rehearsed that enough that I get that. I see that Brian's saying, hey, we're out of time for this. And what is it? It's all about time and distance, isn't it? It's all about making sure that we have the best advantage to get where we need to go together. And that matters: boardroom, classroom, home, kitchen table.
Maybe not use the term safe word, because that has a different connotation. But
we're right back to Brian's been trapped many times.
Okay. Well, all right. So we went over this a lot because these are complex situations that have to deal with the environment, the person involved, the people involved, you and being involved in the situation. You're like, there's all these dynamics to these. And so I kind of like, what do you want? What would you tell listeners to remember the next time they feel the urge to add one more sentence, to do and another thing? Because, to be fair too, we often do that. And this is why, I mean, you cover this more on the Patreon, but like we often do that without realizing that we're doing it. So you're not doing it intentionally. Like, you're going, all right, well, and I just want to make sure this, and it's like, okay, you're doing the and another thing. It was solved. It was gone. It's like hit and move. Like, so what can we do the next time we feel that urge to add one more sentence or one more text?
So first of all, you brought it up, but Patreon, and another thing, it's fun.
Yeah,
Dan is a great host. It's always fun talking to Dan. So please tune in. And then always leave a like if you like it, leave a hate if you hate it. We'd rather have the like,
Yeah.
obviously, right?
Yeah.
You used, I'll frame it this way. These are my closing remarks. You used STOP earlier, and it was a great acronym. It's something that I could learn and jot down. I could have a little index card in my desk or on the wall next to my mirror before I go out to make sure that I framed everything correctly before I go on. Okay. Or just come and take a course for us and you don't need to write shit down. The ability to stop is a form of strength, not weakness. If you understand that from the get, that being able to stop is a sign of strength, you're not weak. That helps our coppers, that helps our uniform people, that helps our authoritative, our C-suite executives, our supervisors to understand, okay, this is all right to do. And the second part of that is, look, you're not abandoning your principles or standards or policies or procedures to avoid unnecessary escalation. You can't do that. You can't trade something. There's very few things. A hostage negotiator in a tense confrontation with a man, beheading babies or something. I can think of one in a quadrillion times, and it almost never happens, right? But right here in this moment, you're thinking, well, I'm the cop. I don't need to step back or step down. Keep thinking that way. How important is your career to you, right? Then your responsibility doesn't have to be to win every moment. It can be, I want to make the best choices and decisions regarding the situations I confront today. What a noble thing to tell yourself before you go out on the street, right? So you have to leave room for the other person to move in a direction. Okay, if you're jujitsu in every conversation and you're pinning them to the mat and then going, why won't you fucking move? Okay, that's counterproductive. So you got to see yourself doing that. Always update. Constant assessment and updating your assumptions based on the reality and the context of the situation you're observing. And then, anytime that you find yourself continuing to pressure or punish, it's going to lead to undesirable outcome. So create a mnemonic, create the shit sandwich in your mind, or the dumpster fire or an explosion. And then that'll back you off the X when you go, hey, I'm rapidly approaching, So I would say the person who can stop at the right moment isn't losing control of the interaction. They're demonstrating that they have full control of the interaction. And that's a huge point.
Yeah, and the STOP kind of acronym is great because separate the present from the past, test your purpose, observe the direction of behavior, pick the proportionate next move. But regardless if you remember all that, you just remember stop. Like you know what I mean? It's like stop.
That's what they meant. I mean, that's why
that's it.
Put that together. It's the
that's
ultimate
why I loved it.
That's
what I mean. That's why I liked it. I was like, oh yeah, remember that stop sign coming up.
The swollen ass, Brian. The wreck of the Hesperus.
Well, we covered a lot in here. Again, we've got more, of course, on the Patreon, like we discussed, and we got all kinds of other stuff on there. We got more episodes coming up for those who keep, who are reaching out. Please keep doing that. You've got other cases or topics or interesting things that you think you'd like us to cover. We'll absolutely do that. If you enjoy the podcast, please, remember to share it with a friend, give it a like or a thumbs up. And then, Greg, any other final words?
Look, we work hard to bring you the knowledge that you're requesting from us, and we love doing this. So something as simple as a thumbs up or a repost, you don't even have to spend the time commenting to hit a thumbs up, all right? It means a lot to us, and it might tune in somebody that needs to hear this information. You might already be a SME. Help somebody out, help a brother out, or a sister.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget that training changes behavior.